It all started just a week ago, but it's been playing on a loop in my mind ever since. My family isn't your average holiday crew. While most people spend their winter vacations relaxing somewhere warm or heading to ski resorts, my relatives prefer something different. Every year, we rent a huge, isolated cabin deep in the Vermont woods. This year's spot looked like a log fortress, sturdy, sprawling, and perfect for our unusual traditions. That's where things took a strange turn. One of our favorite, and admittedly dangerous, family rituals is a giant game of laser tag, not in some backyard, but in the pitch-black forest. Every second to last night of the trip, the adults suit up in thick winter gear, grab heavy-duty laser guns handcrafted by my Uncle Wyatt, and disappear into the snow-covered wilderness for a no-holds-barred showdown. Yes, it's exactly as wild as it sounds. The game is simple. Last person not tagged wins the cash prize and bragging rights until next year. If multiple players survive until midnight, they split the winnings. Once you're hit, you return to the fire pit near the cabin and wait. When the second-to-last player returns, everyone fires their real guns into the sky to signal the game's end. Safe? Probably not. But tradition is tradition. This was my first year playing. I just turned 18, and I was pumped. Not for the money, but just to finally be part of the madness. Before we started, Uncle Wyatt gave us the rundown: how to use the equipment, where to aim, and the rules. Then, without warning, he sprinted into the woods like a lunatic. Everyone scattered. Most of them ran uphill, so I figured I'd head downhill, less traffic, better odds. The snow on the ground gave just enough visibility. I wandered deep into the forest and found a small ridge where I could catch my breath and scout the area. After resting, I started creeping sideways along the hill, trying to loop around and surprise someone. I must have walked for 15 minutes, putting serious distance between me and the cabin. Then I heard a soft crunch footsteps behind me. I ducked behind a tree. At first, I didn't see anyone, but then, straining my eyes, I spotted a faint trail of footprints leading to a thick tree, maybe 15 yards away. Someone was there, hiding, watching. But why hadn't they tagged me? I had been completely exposed. That's when I started to feel genuinely uneasy. I took off uphill, trying to put distance between me and whoever that was. But soon, I saw another set of footprints. These started deep in the woods, looped toward me, then vanished back into the trees. Someone had flanked me, and they'd gone even deeper than I had. Then I heard a thud like someone falling in the snow. I bolted back toward the cabin. My phone said it was past 11 p.m. Time had flown. I followed some fresh prints leading toward the house and picked up the pace. Just past a line of trees, I spotted my cousin Drew walking casually with his laser gun. I ducked, aimed, and got him. His marker lit up. He groaned, slammed his hand on a tree, and sulked off toward the cabin. I grinned, proud of my first kill. High on adrenaline, I came up with a plan. I'd sprint forward, then double back and hide in a spot where my footprints would mislead anyone following me. Classic bait and switch. I executed it perfectly, hiding behind a tree without leaving obvious tracks. I waited. Suddenly, my marker blinked. I'd been hit. But how? The laser beam was coming from the spot I'd just left. Someone had tracked me. I stood up, expecting the shooter to turn off their laser and reveal themselves. But they didn't. The beam stayed pointed directly at me. It felt wrong, like they were taunting me. I started walking toward the beam. All I could see was a pair of hands holding the laser gun. The body was hidden behind a tree. Just then, gunshots rang out in the distance. The signal that the game was over. But if I'd been tagged and Drew was the last person I hit who tagged me, that's when the shooter stepped into view. I didn't recognize them. A total stranger. And standing next to them, another stranger. Before I could react, I heard crunching behind me. I spun around and saw a man in a ski mask holding a knife in one hand and a trash bag in the other.
He locked eyes with me and charged.
I ran, screaming, dropped everything. I could hear all three of them chasing me, shouting words I couldn't even recognize as English. The snow slowed me down, but I didn't dare stop or look back. I was running for my life. Finally, I saw the lights of the cabin. I pushed harder, lungs burning, legs shaking, and that's when I saw Uncle Wyatt. He came running from the clearing with a rifle in hand. He raised it and fired 3 shots into the air. I heard someone behind me stumble and fall. Then silence. I collapsed at Wyatt's feet and passed out in the snow. The next morning, my aunt explained that she had dropped her laser gun during the game after a fall, which explained how the strangers got their hands on it. Drew had apparently tagged 6 people before I got him, so he really was the final kill. Uncle Wyatt and my dad searched the woods that night but found nothing. Too many tracks, too many paths. The next morning I was jolted awake by the sound of shouting. It was Wyatt yelling into the forest like a man possessed. I threw on my coat and rushed outside. That's when I saw it, a snowman, standing perfectly still at the edge of the woods, facing directly toward the cabin. Clutched in its stick hand was the missing laser gun. Without hesitation, Wyatt raised his rifle and put 3 bullets through the snowman's head. Then he turned around and walked back inside without a word. It's only been a few days since then. But if anything else happens, I'll let you know. Middle school left me with more awkward memories than I'd care to admit, but one in particular still haunts me. It wasn't just weird or uncomfortable. It was deeply unsettling, the kind of experience that clings to you years later, no matter how badly you want to forget. I didn't have many friends back then. Just 3: Nolan, Eli, and Corey. We were the kind of kids who never quite fit in, which made us stick together even tighter. But over time, the dynamic shifted. Eli and I started to pull away from Nolan and Corey, though none of us ever talked about it out loud. That summer, Nolan surprised us by inviting the group to spend a week at his family's summer house in Maine. None of us had even heard of the place, a secluded island somewhere in Casco Bay. Given how private his family always was, it didn't shock us. They were unusual, but that's a whole other story. The car ride was long and tense. I had a cold and kept sneezing, which irritated Nolan's dad, who was clearly a germ freak. Corey and I also argued the whole ride over something silly typical for us. We had to take a ferry to reach the island, and that part was at least a little exciting. The house was small but cozy. It felt like stepping into another reality. I don't know how else to put it. The island itself had a surreal vibe. Everyone seemed to know Nolan. Even strangers on the street greeted him by name. We spent most of our time biking, and for kids our age, that was perfect. On the second day, I noticed my favorite Barcelona snapback was missing. I was heartbroken. It was the only soccer merch I had. Nolan guessed I'd left it on the beach, but I was sure I'd brought it back. I even cried to his dad, who brushed me off and told me not to let something so trivial ruin the trip. So I forced myself to move on. The next day, I realized one of my collectible pens was missing. I was obsessed with pens back then and brought my collection everywhere. Eli said he remembered seeing me holding it on my bike, which made me feel worse. I didn't want to cry again, especially not in front of Nolan's dad, so I said I wasn't feeling well and went to bed early. I woke up around 3 a.m., unable to fall back asleep. While I was tossing and turning, I suddenly heard whispering. It was almost too quiet to hear, but it was definitely there. It sounded like it was coming from Corey's bunk, but I couldn't be sure. I was too scared to say anything, so I stayed quiet and eventually drifted back to sleep. I didn't mention it the next morning. Later that day, while we were playing outside, Corey said he had to use the bathroom. He was gone a while, which was typical, but when I glanced at the house, I saw him staring at us from a second-floor window. That wouldn't have been strange, except the house didn't have a bathroom upstairs. I looked again, and he was gone. I told Nolan's dad I felt sick again, and stayed behind when they went out for dinner. Lying in bed, I kept thinking about what I'd seen, the whispering, the missing things, Corey in the window. Something wasn't right. I got up and searched his duffel bag. What I found made my stomach drop: my Barcelona cap. Then my missing pen. Then a nail clipper my mom had packed, a toothbrush, and even a pair of my underwear. I was horrified. But the worst part was his notebook. I almost wish I hadn't opened it. The pages were filled with disturbing sketches, monsters, violent acts, horrific scenes. Some were so heavily drawn the pencil had ripped through the paper. There were even drawings of me. One showed me nailed to a cross with my legs missing. Toward the end of the notebook, my name appeared over and over. The last page said, "I'll do it tomorrow." Shaking, I showed the notebook to Nolan's dad. He was stunned. He told me to return everything the way I found it. I didn't want to, but I listened. Before putting the notebook back, I tore out one of the pages. Minutes later, he gathered everyone and said there was a family emergency, we had to leave immediately. As we packed, I could feel Corey's stare on my back. I was too afraid to turn around. We drove non-stop back home. Nolan's dad dropped Corey off first, then Nolan and Eli, and finally me. On the ride to my house, he told me not to say anything to my parents, that he'd already spoken to Corey's family, and it would be best to let it go. I nodded, but as soon as I got inside, I broke down and told my parents everything. They were furious. Within minutes, they were on the phone with the police. I showed the page I had taken. That was enough for the police to get a warrant. They found the notebook and most of my missing items, all except the pen. I never saw Corey again. His family moved away. He didn't return to school. I never hung out with Nolan either after that. But just last week, a letter showed up in my mailbox, no return address. Inside was the pen, along with a note that simply read, "I remember everything. Now I'm seriously considering moving." By the time senior year rolled around, I realized I'd spent every spring break stuck on campus. While everyone else jetted off to beaches and booze-fueled getaways, I stayed behind, partly because of money, partly because I just didn't bother. But that final year hit different. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd missed out on something. So I decided it was time to do something, anything, before college ended. I still couldn't afford international travel, but my girlfriend Erin started searching for low-cost options closer to home. She ended up finding this quiet little cabin tucked deep in the woods of Lake County, California. It had an old-school charm, a fireplace, a vintage record player, a hot tub, and absolutely no cell reception. Definitely not a wild beach party, but it felt like the perfect kind of escape. We invited her best friend Zoe and her boyfriend Nick to join us and make it a double-date getaway. None of us had ever done a vacation like this together, so we were excited. The drive was about 2.5 hours. Nick had a ridiculously small Mini Cooper, so the girls had to squeeze in the back. He was weirdly touchy about his car. Every time someone brought it up, he got defensive. Still, it was a convertible, so at least the ride felt breezy. We arrived just after 8 p.m. It was completely dark, and the cabin looked a little creepy with no lights on and trees pressing in from all sides. Still, the inside was cozy. That first night, we hung out by the fire, opened some wine, played board games, and just relaxed. The second night was more lively. We finally convinced Nick to join us in the hot tub, which was in its own screened-in room connected to the back of the cabin. We brought drinks, cranked up some music, and started a game of Never Have I Ever. Everyone was loose, laughing and buzzed. Then a flash of light, blinding and fast, lit up the entire spa room like a lightning strike. But there were no clouds, no thunder, just light. We froze. I turned off the music. No one said anything. I climbed out of the tub and stepped out onto the back deck. All I could see was blackness and forest. Then I heard it, a sharp clicking sound. It came from somewhere deep in the woods. Then another from the opposite direction. Then a third. Seconds later came the whistling, from multiple places at once. It felt like the trees were closing in. I yelled for everyone to get inside. We slammed the door shut and locked everything. Sitting in the living room, soaked and shivering, we tried to come up with explanations. A prank? Locals messing with us? Then came the banging. Someone was pounding on the front door hard. Zoe panicked. Erin was already crying. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find and told Nick to call the police. I shouted that I had a gun, a bluff, of course. The pounding stopped. Nick said the cops were on the way, but we were in the middle of nowhere. No clue how long it would take. Everything was silent for a few minutes, until the living room window shattered. A rock crashed through it with so much force it knocked over a lamp. Screams. Glass everywhere. I told everyone to run upstairs and lock themselves in. I stayed downstairs, knife in hand, waiting for someone to try to climb in. But no one came. Instead, I walked to the broken window and picked up the rock. Taped to it was a note, written in jagged black marker, L-E-A-V-A. Minutes later, the police finally arrived. They swept the property, searched the woods, questioned us, but found nothing. No footprints. No people. No explanation. We weren't going to stick around for round 2. We didn't even wait until morning. We packed up and got out of there that same night. The Airbnb host gave us a full refund without hesitation, but completely ignored all of our follow-up messages. Aaron's convinced they knew something, maybe even expected something to happen. It would explain the unusually low price and how far off the grid the place was. As for me, I'm done with quiet remote cabins. Next spring break, I'll take overpriced cocktails.
I gotta tell you this wild story about my old roommate, Jake. It's been a while, but it still messes with my head. I'm just some dude, you know? Work a boring job unloading trucks all day, nothing special. It's backbreaking work, lifting heavy boxes, sweating like crazy, and by the time I get home, I'm wiped. Me and Jake shared this rundown apartment, peeling paint, creaky floors, the works. The place was a dump, but it was cheap, and I needed someone to split the rent with. Jake answered my ad, seemed normal enough. He was chill at first, or so I thought. We'd hang out sometimes, watch dumb action movies, or he'd help me fix the leaky faucet. Said he worked nights at some security gig, so we barely crossed paths. I'd be crashing when he left, and he'd roll in as I was heading out. Worked fine, I guess. The apartment was on the second floor of this old building. The stairs creaked like crazy, and the hallway always smelled like mildew. My room was at the end of the hall, and Jake's was across from mine. There was a small living room with a couch that sagged in the middle, and a kitchen that was barely big enough for one person. The basement was the worst part. Dark, damp, and smelled like something died down there. I avoided it like the plague. But then, stuff started getting weird. Like I'd grab a pizza, eat half, and the next day, it'd be gone. Not just a slice, whole thing. I'd think, man, am I that hungry and forgetting? Then my keys. They'd be on the hook by the door, but I'd find them under the couch or something. One time, I found my toothbrush in the kitchen sink. Swear to God. Dumb little things, right? I blamed it on being tired. Work was kicking my ass, and the coffee maker was on the fritz, so I was running on fumes. It got creepier though. One night, I heard this scratching sound, like nails on wood. Figured it was the stray cat that hung around, 'cause the floorboards always groaned when it bolted across. But it kept happening, late, when Jake was at work. I'd lie there, eyes open, just listening. Then my diary, yeah, I keep one, don't judge, showed up on my pillow one day. I know I stashed it in my sock drawer. That's when I freaked. Was someone sneaking in? The lock was crap, so I ordered this cheap camera online. Set it up in the living room, didn't tell Jake, didn't want to look nuts. A few days later, my buddy Mike came over. We were gonna watch the game, but he kept glancing around, like something was off. "Dude, you hear that?" he whispered. I didn't hear anything, but he swore there was a faint humming coming from the basement. I shrugged it off, but it stuck with me. That night, I checked the camera footage. Holy hell, it's Jake. Not at work. Nah. He'd leave at night, then sneak back after like 20 minutes. He'd head straight to the basement. That place was nasty, damp, dark, smelled like old socks. But there he was, down there all day. Then, when I was out cold, he'd creep upstairs, going through my stuff, flipping through my diary, sitting on my bed, watching me sleep. I'm shaking just watching this, heart hammering like crazy. He's in a security uniform, but it's fake. Found out he got canned months ago. I couldn't just let it slide. Next morning, he stumbles in, and I'm sitting there, coffee cold in my hands. "Hey, Jake. How's the job going?" I say, voice all shaky. He yawns, shrugs. "Fine. Same old." I swallow hard. "Really? 'Cause I heard you got canned months ago." He freezes. Face goes white as a sheet. "Well, what? Who said that?" "Doesn't matter. Is it true?" He flops on the couch, head in his hands. Yeah, it's true. Lost the job ages ago. Didn't want to tell you. Felt like a loser. I'm pissed, but my voice cracks. "So why you hiding in the basement? Why you messing with my stuff? Watching me sleep, man. That's messed up." He looks up, eyes wet. I don't know. I'm sorry. I couldn't deal. It was dumb, okay? I didn't mean to scare you. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't. "You gotta go, Jake. Pack your crap and get out." He nods, all quiet, and leaves the next day. I switched the locks, but it didn't help. Stuff still felt wrong. Like I'd find a sock I swore I'd washed back in the hamper, or hear that damn scratching again. One night, I'm half asleep, and there's this thud from the basement. I grab a flashlight, legs like jelly, and creep down. Nothing's there, just that wet, rotten stink hitting me hard. I noped out fast, moved out a month later, couldn't take it. I still wonder about Jake. What was he doing down there? Why me? I never checked the basement again. Too chicken shit. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe not. Keeps me up sometimes thinking about it. Anyway, that's my story. Watch your back, yeah? You never really know who's living with you. My name is Kevin. I guess I'll just dive in. I'm not good at telling stories, so bear with me, okay? I used to live in this little apartment. Nothing fancy, just a cheap place with creaky floors and a tiny kitchen. My cat, Muffin, used to chase shadows across the room at night, her little paws tapping on the wood. Kinda cute, but it'd wake me up sometimes. Anyway, I'm just a regular dude. Work a boring job, come home, eat some ramen, you know the drill. About a year ago, I got a roommate. His name was Kevin too, which was weird at first. We'd laugh about it like, "Hey Kev, pass the salt." And he'd say, "Which Kev you talking to?" He seemed cool though. Quiet guy, paid rent on time, always there to listen when I'd ramble about my day. I thought, man, this guy's a good friend. But things started getting strange. It started small. Like I'd leave my phone on the counter while I showered, and when I came back, I'd find texts sent to my buddies. Dumb stuff like, "You're a jerk," or "I don't want to hang out anymore." I'd call them up, all confused, like, "Dude, I didn't send that." They'd get mad, stop talking to me. Kevin would just sit there sipping his coffee saying, "Man, that sucks. People are so flaky." I'd nod, feeling like an idiot. Then I started feeling off. Tired all the time, head foggy like I couldn't think straight. Kevin kept pointing it out. "Hey, you okay? You look shaky. Maybe you're stressed or something." He'd go on about anxiety, depression, all this stuff I never thought about before. I'd say, "Nah, I'm fine." But he'd keep pushing, like, "No man, I see it. You should talk to someone." I started doubting myself. Maybe he was right. One night, I woke up, middle of the night, pitch black, and my body felt heavy, like I'd been hit by a truck. I could barely move. I heard Kevin in the kitchen, clinking dishes or something. Next morning I asked, "Were you up late?" He just shrugged, said, "Nope, slept like a baby." But I swore I heard him. My coffee tasted weird that day too. Bitter. Kinda chalky. I didn't think much of it. Just figured the milk went bad. Things got worse. My friends stopped texting back completely. My girlfriend, ex-girlfriend now, dumped me after getting some creepy message from my phone. I'd leave it on the couch for 5 minutes, and boom, another fight. Kevin was always there after, patting my shoulder saying, "She didn't deserve you, man. I'm here for you." I'd mumble a thanks, but something about his voice. It sounded too calm, you know? One day, I came home early. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Muffin was hiding under the couch, which she never does. I walked past Kevin's room, and his door was cracked open. I peeked in, couldn't help it, and saw him sitting on his bed, hunched over a notebook. He was muttering to himself, scribbling fast. I cleared my throat and he snapped the book shut, grinning at me like, "Oh hey, didn't hear you come in." I asked what he was writing. He said, "Just work stuff," but his hands were shaky. I let it slide, didn't want to push it. Couldn't sleep that night. Kept hearing this faint hum, like a voice, but not quite, coming from his room. I got up, tiptoed to the hall, and pressed my ear to his door. He was whispering. Next phase, trust broken, increased dosage. I froze. Dosage. What the hell? I backed off, heart thumping, and locked my door. Next day, I pretended everything was normal. Ate breakfast, laughed at his dumb jokes. But when he left for work, I snooped. Found a box under his bed, old files, notebooks, a recorder. One folder had my name on it. Inside, pages about me, my fears, stuff I'd told him late at night, like how I hate being alone. There were notes, subject shows, signs of confusion, meds working. Meds? Then I saw more folders, other names, other projects, photos of people I didn't know, timelines of their breakdowns. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I grabbed Muffin and bolted. Left everything. Clothes, dishes. Didn't care. Moved in with a cousin. Blocked Kevin's number. But a week later, I got a voicemail. No caller ID. It was him, laughing soft, saying, "You're a fun one. See you around." I deleted it, but I still hear that laugh sometimes, when it's quiet. I don't know what he wanted. Control? Some sick game? The apartment's empty now, last I heard. I drive a different way home these days, just in case. Muffin still hides sometimes, and I wonder if she remembers him too. I gotta tell you about this wild thing that went down with my old roommate, Marcus. I'm just some dude, okay? Work a boring job at a tech place. Live in this rundown apartment with creaky floors and a fridge that hums too loud. The rent was cheap, so I needed someone to split it with. Marcus answered my ad. Seemed chill at first, quiet, paid on time, even fixed the wobbly table leg once. But the dude was always burning his toast. Kitchen smelled like a campfire gone wrong every morning. At first it was fine. We'd hang out sometimes, watch old kung fu movies or whatever. But then, I don't know, things got weird. One night I got home late from grabbing coffee. Must have been like 7 p.m. And Marcus goes, "Hey, how was the coffee shop? Get your latte?" I froze. How'd you know I was there?" He just grinned, all awkward, and said, "Saw your car outside." But that place is miles away. No way he just saw it. I brushed it off, told myself I was overthinking it. People say stuff, right? But it kept happening. I'd call my buddy about some dumb work thing, and next day Marcus is like, "Your friend still mad about his boss?" I never told him that. My heart started racing every time he opened his mouth. I'd be cooking dinner, spaghetti usually, 'cause I'm lazy, and I'd hear the floorboards creak behind me. My cat would bolt across the room at night, and those creaks would wake me up. I'd peek out my door. Nothing. Just shadows. I started thinking maybe I was paranoid. Then it got creepier. I posted a pic on Instagram, me at the park, just chilling by the lake. Marcus comes home and goes, "That trail by the water looked nice. Did you see any ducks?" I didn't even mention the trail. My hands got all sweaty. "How'd you know that?" I asked. He laughed, too loud, and said, "Oh, just a guess." But his eyes were weird, like he was hiding something. One night, I couldn't sleep. My neighbor's dog was barking like crazy outside, driving me nuts. I got up to close the window and figured I'd scroll my phone. That's when I saw it. Marcus's laptop was open on the couch. I know I shouldn't have looked, but I did. There were folders with my name, screenshots of every post I'd ever made, even dumb stories about my lunch. He had pics from my friends' pages too, stuff I was tagged in, fake accounts with no pics following my sister, my co-workers. My chest felt tight. I wanted to puke. I didn't say anything at first, too freaked out. I mean, what if he lost it? I started locking my door at night, kept my phone close. Then, a few days later, I'm at this burger joint with friends. Posted a check-in on Facebook, 'cause the fries were killer. Halfway through my meal, Marcus walks in. "Hey, what a coincidence," he says, all cheery. I just stared. "Why are you here?" He shrugged. "Just hungry. Small world, huh?" Number no way. I checked my phone later. He'd been tracking me. Some app we both used had my location on. I turned it off, hands shaking. It didn't stop. My ex called me one day, out of nowhere. Said some guy, my roommate, messaged him, asking about our breakup. Said he was worried about me. Marcus, digging into my past like some psycho. I felt naked, you know? Like he'd ripped my life open. I snapped. "Marcus, what the hell? Why are you stalking me?" I yelled. He started crying, big, messy sobs. Said he was lonely, that he just wanted to be my friend. "If I knew everything, we'd be close," he said. It was so messed up. I told him to get out. He begged, promised he'd stop, but I couldn't even look at him. He left a week later, dragging his stuff out while I watched from my room. But it's not over. I still see his car sometimes, parked down the street from work. I get random friend requests from blank profiles. Is it him? I don't know. I moved, changed my locks. But when it's quiet at night, when the fridge hums or the floor creaks, I feel like he's still there, watching, waiting. I don't think I'll ever shake it.
A few years ago, my cousin and I decided to explore an abandoned house on the outskirts of the city. We had heard stories about it, a wealthy family that disappeared without a trace in the 1970s, and the house was left empty. Our curiosity led us to enter one night, flashlights in hand. The house was in ruins. The windows were broken, and the door barely hung on its hinges. Upon entering, the air was thick with moisture and decay. We walked through the main room, where some dusty furniture still remained. Suddenly, we heard a noise coming from upstairs, like someone dragging their feet. We thought it was an animal, but the sound was too human. We went upstairs, and upon reaching the hallway, we found several closed doors. We approached one, and when my cousin turned the doorknob, the door opened by itself with an eerie creak. Upon entering, we saw a children's room, with an old crib and toys scattered on the floor. But what froze our blood was a weak laugh, like that of a small child, coming from the darkest corner. When we illuminated it with a flashlight, we saw no one. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. We tried to open it, but it was stuck. We knocked desperately, until suddenly, the door opened on its own. Without thinking, we ran out of the house and never returned. A few days later, we researched more about the family. We discovered that their young son had disappeared one night, and the parents, consumed by grief, took their own lives shortly after. No one knew what had happened to the child, but we felt something dark was tied to that house. Months passed, but the image of the house and the strange laughter lingered in my mind. I decided to go back alone, driven by a feeling I couldn't ignore. When I arrived, The house seemed even more desolate, with thick fog enveloping the place. I entered and went upstairs, where, at the end of the hallway, I found a door we hadn't noticed before. When I opened it, the room was empty, but strange symbols were carved into the walls. It was then that the laugh returned, this time closer, more distorted. The air grew heavy, and a pressure in my chest made me fear the worst. When I turned around, I saw a reflection in the broken mirror. The empty eyes of a child stared at me. At that moment, I understood that the child had never left. Something in that house had trapped him. With my heart pounding, I ran out of the room, and when I reached the stairs, I saw a childlike figure at the end of the hallway. It was the same child with empty eyes. I knew something dark dwelled there, waiting, claiming those who dared to enter. I managed to escape the house and never went back. But something continues to haunt me. Every time I close my eyes, the laughter returns to my mind, and that feeling of being watched from the darkness never goes away. It was the summer of 2012 when my friend Alex and I decided to sneak into an abandoned house in our city. We had seen it a million times since we were kids, always there with its dilapidated and desolate appearance. It had been uninhabited for years, and during that time, the people in the neighborhood had started telling strange stories about the place. They said it was haunted, that at night you could hear inexplicable noises, lights would turn on by themselves, and shadows move through the broken windows. Of course, all of that was just a bunch of rumors, things adults said to scare us. We took it as a challenge, something fun to do on a boring night. We prepared for the adventure. A backpack with flashlights, some drinks, and a bit of nervousness, but nothing that would stop us. When we arrived, the house loomed in front of us, imposing in its decay. The windows were broken, the garden was a mess, and the front door hung from a single hinge, as if it were waiting to be opened. At first glance, it seemed like the house was dead, but something in the air gave me a slight chill. Still, we crossed the threshold without thinking too much about it. The air inside was heavy, humid, with a smell of mold and something else, like time had stopped there. We walked through the ground floor without finding anything too interesting. Some walls covered in graffiti, broken furniture, and dust everywhere. It wasn't until we approached a wooden door that we realized something wasn't right. The door at the end of the hallway led to a basement. At that moment, a strange feeling took over me, but Alex, as always, was determined to move forward. "Come on, what could happen?" he said, and I, not wanting to seem like a coward, followed him. We carefully descended the creaky wooden stairs, lighting the place with our flashlights. The basement was spacious, but dark and gloomy. It was filled with old furniture and boxes full of useless things. Nothing particularly frightening at first. We began rummaging through the boxes, curious about forgotten objects and old clothes, when suddenly, a faint whisper cut through the air. We looked at each other, both confused. At first, we thought it was our imagination, the typical sound of a house that had been empty for so long. But the whisper repeated, this time clearer, as if someone was speaking right behind us. We turned quickly, flashlights in hand, but there was nothing. The basement seemed as empty and dead as before. A chill ran down my spine, but before I could say anything, one of the boxes next to us fell to the ground for no apparent reason. The crash was like a scream in the stillness of the basement. At that moment, an intense cold filled the room, as if an icy draft had suddenly come out of nowhere. We stood frozen, looking around, not knowing what to think. It was then that we saw it. A shadow slipped quickly into the corner of the basement, moving with a fluidity that didn't seem human. My heart raced, and without thinking, we both ran toward the stairs. But when we reached the top, the basement door slammed shut, as if someone were standing on the other side blocking it. We pounded on the door desperately, shouting for help, but the door didn't move an inch. Panic began to take over me. We didn't know what was happening, but we felt that something wasn't right. The only thing we could do was pound and scream until, suddenly, the door opened by itself. We rushed out of there, not looking back or stopping until we reached the street. The cold night air had never felt so refreshing. Once outside, we stood in silence, staring at the house from a distance, still trying to understand what we had just experienced. We both knew something else had happened there, something that couldn't be explained. Days later, we found out the truth behind the house, the story we had never wanted to hear. In the basement, years earlier, the bodies of several people who had gone missing in the area in past decades have been found. Apparently, the house had been used by a serial killer, and the basement had been his place of torture. The stories of missing people matched what we had experienced. Something in that basement, something that had been trapped there over time, hadn't let us go. And although the house seemed empty, we felt there was something else watching us, something dark and ancient still dwelling within its walls. We never went near that house again, but every time I walk by, a chill runs through my body, as if the echoes of that night still linger in the air, waiting to be heard again. When I was a teenager, my friends and I used to explore abandoned houses for fun. We were drawn to the secluded places, the old structures filled with history, and the thrill of discovering something hidden or mysterious. One summer night, we decided to venture further out of the city limits and found an old house in the middle of the countryside. It was isolated, surrounded by a small forest, and seemed to have been forgotten by time. The structure was in poor condition, with cracked walls and a roof about to collapse, but that only heightened the excitement. We exchanged nervous smiles and decided to go in. The only accessible entry was a broken window at the back. We climbed onto a nearby structure and, with some effort, squeezed through. The air inside was stale, and the humidity was overwhelming. Every step we took echoed in the silence. The house was filled with old furniture and dusty objects, remnants of what had once been a home. The rooms were empty, but in every corner, there were traces of the past. A fallen lamp, books on broken shelves, a frayed carpet. It seemed as if the inhabitants had suddenly left, never to return. We explored the first floor and then climbed up to the second. The creaking wood beneath our feet was unsettling, but curiosity kept us moving forward. When we entered one of the rooms, something caught our attention, a large full-length mirror. It had an intricately carved wooden frame, something that looked like it belonged to a much earlier era. The most surprising thing, however, was that the glass was remarkably clean, almost as if someone had polished it recently, despite the thick layer of dust covering everything else in the house. One of my friends, Tomas, walked up to the mirror and, with a mocking grin, stood in front of it. "I'm sure something is watching us from the other side," he joked, looking at his reflection. We all laughed, but something changed in the air at that moment. My laughter faded when I saw something that froze my blood. In the reflection, behind us, there was a dark figure, tall and thin, with hollow eyes and an unnatural smile, staring at us intently. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I screamed and pointed at the mirror. "Look," I managed to say, and when everyone turned to look, the figure was there, clear and distinct. It wasn't our imagination. We all saw it. The figure stood behind us, watching us in silence. In the reflection, its empty eyes gleamed with a sinister intensity, and its smile stretched wider, as if it were enjoying our fear. The figure began to move slowly in the reflection, its movement strange, as if it were walking toward us. We quickly turned around, looking frantically around the room, but there was nothing there. It was empty. There was no one behind us. The air seemed to freeze, and the silence became deafening. We stood still, looking at each other, too terrified to look back at the mirror, but the feeling that something was watching us didn't go away. Tomas was the first to react, pushing us out of the room. "Let's get out of here," he shouted, and without thinking twice, we all ran downstairs, sprinting to the first floor as fast as we could, the fear driving us. When we reached the window we had entered through, we jumped out and didn't stop running until we were far from the house, panting from the effort, but the fear still clung to us. The next day, Tomas, who seemed unable to stop thinking about what had happened, decided to go back to the house to investigate further. He convinced himself that maybe there was a logical explanation, Maybe it was all in our heads, but when he arrived, the house was no longer there. It was simply gone. The land where it stood the night before was empty, just trees and an open field. He searched the area, but the house had vanished completely, as if it had never existed. Since then, none of us spoke of the mirror or what we saw that night. As the years passed, we tried to convince ourselves that it was just a trick of the mind, an illusion caused by tension and fear. But sometimes when I look at myself in a mirror, that feeling returns, as if something is lurking behind me, waiting to appear once more. Sometimes I feel like I'm not alone. Every time I pass by a large mirror, a strange pressure settles in my chest, as if something is trying to push through the glass and get closer to me. It's a terrifying sensation, impossible to ignore. And although I try to convince myself that it's just my mind playing tricks, the image of that figure, with its unnatural smile, remains vivid in my memory. I know that what we saw that night wasn't just a mirage. There was something there, something that was watching us, waiting for the right moment to return.